The Free People Show, episode 21.
The Free People Show is a show about the practice and politics of being free. Free from government, free from coercion, and free to be yourself. Host Phil Anderson is a libertarian, a Christian, and was the kind of kid who, according to his grandmother, just wouldn't shut up. Phil and his co-hosts will talk politics, but also life in general, challenging you, entertaining you, persistently rapping on the back door of orthodox two-party politics, sparing nobody and taking no prisoners, maybe even making you laugh. Tweet us at @FreePeopleShow with questions and suggestions, or comment on Facebook during or after the show. For information about being a guest, hosting a live broadcast, or sponsoring the show, email info@freepeopleshow.com. Thanks for listening. Now, here's your host, Phil Anderson.
Good evening and welcome to the Free People Show, episode 21. Thanks for joining us tonight on our flagship website, freepeopleshow.com. That's where you can go to find all of our archived episodes, as well as information on the various ways you can listen to us tonight and other nights. You're also watching us live on Facebook, so hello everyone on Facebook. My special thanks go out to co-host Patrick Baird and Miles Kristen, both of whom are here tonight. Engineer Samuel Anderson, also here. Business agent Ron DePauw, and new father, also here. Show webmaster Dustin Dreyfus, show contributors Jeff Korch, Jay Ranchod, John Migloch, and the Libertarian Party of Dane County, who finally paid me. Thank you. You can find the Free People Show at freepeopleshow.com, as well as on our host platforms, as I just mentioned. We're also on iTunes now, for sure. I looked that up. So if you go on iTunes, search Free People Show, you'll find us. Make sure you give us favorable reviews so that we can trend on iTunes. Our co-host tonight, Miles Kristen, is a video journalist and activist for government transparency. He's the founder of Wisconsin International Radio and an artist and arranger at the Yellow Rose Gallery at 122 State Street in Madison, Wisconsin. He is everywhere, knows just about everything, and is unafraid of telling the truth about whoever, wherever. Welcome, Miles.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to your own basement. Patrick Baird is the treasurer of the Libertarian Party of Wisconsin, as well as former Web IT chair. As you can see, I need to rewrite this. He was the campaign manager of Anderson for U.S. Senate. He is the author and creator of the Libertarian Federalist, which you can find at libertarianfederalist.com and on Facebook. He's also the author of a series of spy novels called The Beatnik Spy, a true Renaissance man. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you, Phil.
So, our topic tonight is we're going to discuss how the people, in the form of taxation, should not be in the business of subsidizing idiocy in higher education. That's painting with a pretty broad brush, because there's a lot of idiocy in higher education, not only by virtue of the fact that a lot of it is founded by theft, but also what's allowed to be taught, what is expected to be said and not said, what courses are approved and not approved, and even the abridgment of free speech, or the attempt to abridge free speech on many of our fine campuses, where such a notion decades ago would never have been tolerated. Yet today, in the environment in which we live, political correctness has come to mean not being able to say, not being able to express some very fundamental things, just the ability to do that without being harassed in an environment that's supposedly of free ideas, free discussion. We've known for a long time that classrooms at the college level are not that way as a rule anymore, and now the administration and even the government has become involved. This is a pet subject of Patrick's, who's posted and has firm beliefs about the fact that specifically the humanities are not something that we should be funding anymore.
I have an idea that I'd like to propose tonight.
Lay it on. Well, you got a good crowd here. We'll vote, and if we vote with you, then
I've got a feeling it might be a fairly popular idea, at least among our circle.
Awesome.
I was reading an article recently, a story about a professor in the divinity school. I believe it was Chapel Hill, University of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, but I'm not sure. But he was a divinity school professor. And they were sent a university-wide communication, diversity training, here's the times, we want everybody to go. I don't believe it was mandatory diversity training, but it was like highly recommended. And he sent off a university-wide response where he basically said, please don't bother, it's a waste of your time. And he laid out in I thought, very reasoned and reasonable terms why he thought it was a waste of time. I mean, he literally was complaining that, college professors have way too much things pulling on them in other directions, that we're adding one more thing for them to have to deal with. It was just too much. That was his main point. But he also did make some fair points about the whole diversity and, political correct approach to group politics that whole training represents. And as a result, he was accused of harassment by the person putting the this event on.
And that was another university employee that was.
It was a university employee who was like the office of diversity or something like that.
Brainwashing.
And the dean of his school also brought him up on charges.
Charges of
being abusive, and in another campus-wide email, accused him directly of saying things that were racist and bigoted.
Oh my!
Which he didn't do. I mean, if you read his actual, it's a lengthy article out there that has the entire email exchange. And you can see, no, he didn't remotely say anything that was racist.
Well, that's interesting, and not to get off track or in the weeds on this, but when you're telling this story, to me it sounds like an employment issue, and that's one of the interesting distinctions that people often talk about rights in terms of their rights to do certain things, but there's also property rights involved. So if you're an employee, like in this case, if the dean had acted as his employer and said that communication was outside of the scope of his employment or prohibited by employment or something like that, if that were the case, that would be legitimate. But
he's a tenured professor, though.
Yeah, I understand.
Slightly different.
I understand that, but whatever the terms of that employment are, that's the and I'm not advocating that the university shut somebody's free speech down, but there's a difference between free speech in the public sphere and as an employee. Like if I go out and publicly complain about my employer,
which is a fair point.
Yeah. So, but that's not the case. The dean
they totally
stupidly
missed
the point and their
saying.
opportunity, and just went right into full on PC. Craziness.
Right. So, and he did a really good job of defending himself. There were some back and forth emails, which you can also see. But eventually, the upshot of it was he wound up resigning. He wound up retiring, and which is unfortunate. But as I'm reading this, and I had read other similar pieces over the last few weeks, a thought struck me, and I thought, why in the world are taxpayers subsidizing all of this nonsense that's happening on our campuses? Specifically happening largely within the humanities departments. Mm-hmm. Now, so I thought, okay, here's an idea. First of all, my basic premise is this: that not only are a lot of humanities departments and professors in humanities departments engaging in work that is unproductive and pointless. In other words, there's no product that they produce at the end of the day that materially makes a difference in anyone's life. It's just highly academic stuff that's only going to be read by other academics and will never seep out into the larger culture to provide any kind of substantial benefit.
And would you further argue, and I think I know the answer to this, that it's not even really improving the lives or the quality of life of the students?
That's my second point.
Oh, sorry.
My second point is not only are they wasting their time with this stuff that is no real broader value in society, but they're actively doing things that are subverting and corroding our civic values in this country. And now, it's one thing to say I'm, doing academic work that challenges authority or challenges the mainstream. That's all well and good. But when you are actively doing things like attacking the very concept of freedom of speech, when you are engaging in highly divisive identity politics, which is making the situation worse in this country by and large, and when you are basically attacking the very idea of truth itself in some cases, the language, you're taking apart the English language and saying nothing has any meaning in the English language. It means what we think it means or what we don't think it means or whatever. When you are actively undermining things that the rest of us in society cherish and believe in and think are important, then the question becomes, why are we subsidizing this with taxpayer dollars? don't understand what possible justification you could have to say, I published 3 papers in the last 2 years that were read by a small handful of people just like me, and nobody outside of that small group of people read those papers or understood them, and I use language every day in my classroom that anyone outside of my classroom would have no idea what I was talking about, because I'm using terms that only have meaning to other academics, and on top of that, I'm agitating and brainwashing these students to believe in things that we don't want them to believe in, or that we think is harmful to the larger society. Like, the idea that free speech is really not, it's an old-fashioned idea that we really need to just kind of get rid of.
And not only is it funded by taxpayer coercively collected funds, but also we still have a very strong prevailing idea that kids should go to college as a path to something better for themselves, and should, if necessary, go into massive amounts of debt to do so. So not only are taxpayers' monies taken, without consent, used for this purpose, and then we're encouraging students to get into debt, which can be crippling debt, or they may default and somebody's going to end up paying for it some way or another.
Students should be able to have a job within the university system and be able to not necessarily even pay their entire college education with it, but at least a substantial chunk while they're going to school. And I would argue that if investing in the university returns money to the state like it did at one time,
I think it still does to some degree. Certainly in the sciences, the hard sciences.
I mean,
engineering.
I see a lot of problems with the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I could go on about that for a very long time, but I want to just mention one thing is that with all the money that Scott Walker has taken from the university, that none of that goes back to us. It goes to things like building a sports arena or paying back some other money that he
putting
borrowed.
money into the WEDC again, which is
designed
to be corrupt, pretty much.
So I mean, it's funny how he's able to make that argument of let's cut more money from the school, and he gets enough people to go along with it, but the money doesn't even go back to those people. It just goes back to his crony friends and so forth.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned cutting, because that is the heart of my proposal. Is what I would like to propose is that, at least starting here in the UW system, that we cut all humanities programs by 50%.
Well, why not 100%?
Well, because I'm going to get a little bit later to
and
where I think we can go with this.
That's not a taxation and theft issue. But I listened to actually watched a presentation. I wish I remember the gentleman's name. He was a school superintendent in Sacramento in the early 2000s, and he basically looked at the school system in Sacramento and said, what are the things that the school board should be involved in and what shouldn't they be involved in? So his district, at his direction, divested themselves of responsibility for busing, of building maintenance, of lunches, and contracted all that out. They supervised the contract. It was still paid for. That's just what was going to happen. But they let the people concentrate on what they needed, what they were good at. And I would argue that, especially in the case of the humanities, there's no need for books to be in one place anymore. There's no need for professors to be in one place anymore. You can access almost all of it. Maybe not zero, but almost all of it. Even the interactions that being in the presence of somebody else. We conduct business. A lot of American businesses and businesses all over the world conduct a ton of business with online meetings, and you get some back and forth. You get some personal attention as if you were in the room. So I agree with you. But I think we should really look at, in the way that this gentleman presented this, what is the purpose of even having a college now with a huge campus sitting on money granted to them by the federal government? And it looks like we're coming up on a break, so we will cover that question and more. This is a big topic. Patrick's not done talking about his proposal, and I sort of cut him off, and I apologize for that.
No, that's okay.
But I think there's a lot of meat to this issue in terms of not just where the money comes from to fund this sort of stuff, but what it's being used for, what it's being used against, what it supports, what it doesn't support, and the whole idea of the best, truest, accurate nature of a human being that is best for people to be happy and productive and live together well. So we'll get back to that. The Free People Show at freepeopleshow.com. We'll be back in about 2 minutes.